to have you joining us for this session where we'll be going over our Master of Management and Bachelor+Master of Management dual degree career insights. I'm excited to introduce you to Logan in a moment as well. I'll just go through a few logistical pieces and some introductions, and then we'll get started to the heart of the session. But welcome. Logan, we'll move on to the next slide. So my name is Nicole Kelly. My role at UBC Sauder is a recruitment manager, so I work closely with the Master of Management program, as well as our Diploma in Accounting program, but today obviously the focus is the MM. I also have my colleague Scott Entwistle joining us today on the call. He's waving there on the video. He supports the Bachelor+Masters of Management students, and so he'll be available to answer questions as well, but we really focus on kind of supporting you, helping you think about how to submit a most competitive application and kind of just advising you along the way as you consider these programs. So very happy to have you joining us. I do want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we are kind of joining the call from, as well as the land that you're joining from. So UBC Sauder School of Business is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam Nation. We also acknowledge that you are joining us from many places and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. And the reason we do a land acknowledgement, and you'll see this as a very common practice at UBC, is the work that we're doing towards reconciliation and recognizing traditional owners of land. We have a number of touch points for our students to learn about kind of Indigenous populations and kind of the history in Canada around this. And so that's an important part of engaging with the curriculum as well as the content, and also thinking about it from a business perspective as well. How do we kind of ethically engage with these resources as well as individuals that are in this area and on this land as well? I do want to note, you might have noticed when you joined the call, that we are recording this session so that people who can't join can always see the resources later on. Please note that if you would like to leave your video off, if you don't feel comfortable having that on the recording, that's fine. We do encourage you to say hello if you'd like and keep your video on if you prefer, but please note that we are going to be recording and posting this session later on. Fantastic. And then before I introduce Logan and get started, I just want to kind of give a preview of what you can expect from today. So I'm going to do a kind of quick rundown of the two different degrees that we're talking about, kind of two pathways to getting a Master of Management. And then Logan will be going through talking about the Business Career Centre and the services and supports that it provides, as well as the employment outcomes of our class of 2023 in both programs and labor market highlights. So it'll be a great opportunity. So the reason we're running this session, at least at this point in time, is because we do have some major deadlines coming up for both the Master of Management and the B+MM. I'll talk about that at the very end, but yeah, it's a great session to be attending to learn more about career insights and to be able to integrate this into your application, to understand more about the program, to be more knowledgeable, and to be able to submit a more competitive application, and perhaps if you get to the interview stage, to be able to speak to that as well. So that's great. Wonderful. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide here. And I'll just talk through the two different pathways. So as mentioned, to earn a Master of Management degree, you have kind of two options. So a Bachelor+Master of Management is if you would like to do your Bachelor at UBC, followed by the Master of Management in a kind of condensed time period. So the whole program would basically take 4.5 years. You would do your undergraduate degree at one of the UBC faculties that's eligible, which is most of them, to be honest. There's a few that aren't. And you would take 6 courses towards your Master of Management degree while you're in your undergrad, earning kind of your credits and kind of getting a head start on those pieces. And then it would be followed by 6 months, so from June until December, where you're taking kind of more specialized specific courses and just fully focused on the Master of Management program with your cohort. So that is one pathway, and especially if you're in high school or if you're in the early stages of your undergrad degree, might be an option for you. And we can always chat about that. And then the next kind of slide will show us the Master of Management pathway, which is still the same great content, still those kind of really great foundational business skills for folks who didn't study business in their undergrad. But this is for individuals who are to apply to, who are about to graduate or who have recently graduated from a bachelor degree. And so it's a program where you do for 9 months from September until August, and you get the chance to really learn those foundations to kind of focus on the Master of Management content, and you still get to do things like the community business project in both programs as well. Oh, sorry, I meant to say until May. September until May, and then the optional study abroad program in the summertime. So just a flag. So please feel free to move to the next slide, Logan. I'm excited to introduce you, or I'll let you introduce yourself. Let's leave it to you and hear what you have to share with us from some career insights from the BCC.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Nicole. Hi, everyone. Excited to talk to you today. My name is Logan Lorenz. I am one of the career strategists at the Varshney Business Career Centre. My objective here today is to really share some insights about what the Business Career Centre, or BCC, does and offers for you while you're a Sauder student, as well as share some career insights about one of our classes, the class of 2023, to give you a bit of an idea of where they are post-program to help you understand a little bit more about the program. As I mentioned, I work in the Varshney Business Career Centre, or what we tend to just call the BCC. It's one of the student service units at Sauder that you would have access to while you're a student. The Business Career Centre is your home for career development services while you're at Sauder. We're one of the few faculties at UBC that has a dedicated career center for our students, both graduate and undergraduate. And as it applies to you here today, whether you're in the B+MM or MM program, both of those would have career services throughout the duration of your program. We're here to support you with your career goals as you navigate your program, and kind of thinking that during your program, but also after your program. On your screen is our career development model. This model helps to guide students, but it also guides the work that we do in the BCC. We use this as a way to frame a lot of the activities that we do with you. And we commonly refer to this as your unique career journey. It's titled this way because students join us starting at different starting points and different levels of clarity of where they are in career. I've worked with all types of students who know exactly what they want to do, they run through the program and they land there, to the other side of this, of students who really are taking the time to explore and think about different options, or maybe have to navigate what that looks like. And so this model is meant to work with many different types of students. There are 4 pillars in this model. At the center, we see this Know Yourself circle. We believe that understanding who you are and what matters to you will help you feel confident in your decisions as you navigate your career journey. Telling your story is another one of the pillars. This is really about learning how to communicate who you are and what you're interested in as a way to make meaningful connections and find your way career-wise. This communication is through many different ways, through networking, through coffee chats, through how you write, how you describe your skills and experience in a resume or cover letter, as well as how you present yourself in an interview situation. We also, while you're here, help think about exploring career opportunities. A big thing around career is there's many different options out there. There's many different ways you could achieve your goals, or many different options in terms of industries, companies, roles. And so gaining some clarity about that can be really helpful. And one of those is really to explore different options and think about what it might be to be in different areas. And lastly is the pillar about learn through experience. So we want to see you grow and evolve your goals. Through your time at Sauder, you'll be able to learn a lot more about the things that you love and maybe the things that you don't like as much. And those are all relevant as you navigate your career in terms of thinking about where you want to head after the program. The other part of our working with the Business Career Centre is that we have some expectations of you while you're a UBC Sauder student. We expect you to do what we call owning your journey. We expect you to come in being committed in terms of your career journey. Your career is your journey. We're here to help, but the drive and effort really comes from you. And we really want you to take ownership of that. So we put a lot of work in to help develop your career, but it's a really close relationship in terms of what you put in, we'll put in. We also expect you to be proactive. So we provide a lot of opportunities for you to learn, grow, and connect with career experiences through events or resources or connections. It's really up to you, though, in terms of how you engage and capitalize on those connections. And lastly, being resilient. So career paths often evolve and change, particularly knowing there's a lot of students on the call who are in that high school kind of framework, your career interests today are going to evolve many times over in the next 4 to 5 years. What you think you might want to do today may significantly change by the time you graduate and are out there looking for a job. So we believe that being resilient or approaching career with a mindset around resilience can be really helpful as you navigate your career. Next, I'm going to go through some of the ways that the BCC is here to support you. So number one, and I think this is one of the services that most students capitalize, it's one of the ones that they really identify as one of the most important parts of their journey while at Sauder, is one-to-one career coaching with a career strategist. These are booked appointments that you make where you can talk about anything career related. These can be very directed. I have a job application I want to submit, and I need some help going over my resume or cover letter to make sure it's in the best place possible. Other times these can be really exploratory. I don't really know what I want to do, but these are some things I'm thinking about. How can we navigate that together? Another resource or a set of resources that we have are some what we call career development resources. So the BCC itself has developed in-house guides for Sauder students. These are what we often call our career toolkits. So these are different types of resources on different parts of career development. So resume writing, networking, interview skills. We also have a set of what we call working in industry guides. So based on kind of the top industries that most Sauder students go into, we've developed a series of guides on what that industry looks like in terms of what information you need to know, but also what information specifically for Sauder students or Sauder grads is important for you to know. And lastly, we also do a lot of work with our Sauder students around emotional intelligence. So we have an emotional intelligence assessment that we do with all of our graduate students. And a big part of emotional intelligence is an important skill to develop while you're entering into the workplace. The BCC also is here to support with job and experiential learning opportunities. So one of the main ways this comes through is through our job board. So I'll talk about them in a little bit, but we have a dedicated team that helps to locate job opportunities for Sauder students. And so that's one of the things you'd have access to while you're a student. And a second way this shows up for B+MM and MM students is an experiential learning opportunity called the Community Business Project. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the upcoming slide as well. We also have a number of events that are geared towards students. So there's sort of a couple different types of events that we have. But one of them is we have what are called company recruitment sessions. What these look like is these are employers that are interested in hiring or working with Sauder students. And these employers are generally coming to campus in person. They do also do some of these sessions virtually, but they are coming to specifically engage with and talk to, and in many cases, hire Sauder students for roles that they have available. We host lots of these in September as well as January of every year. Specific though to MM, we also have a dedicated student and alumni mixer. So when you're in the program, and especially as you're getting ready to start applying for full-time roles, we want you to engage with previous alumni from the program to understand what it's really like out there in the job market, or understand their experiences while they were applying for jobs. And we also have a dedicated hiring event tailored specific for MM students. So little similar, but a little bit different than those company recruitment sessions. This is an event only for MM students where employers come on campus and they want to talk specifically to you. And lastly, through the BCC, we also have a number of kind of skill development workshops or events specific to B+MM and MM. What this actually looks like is we have a dedicated 1.5 credit career development course. And this course from start to finish really will help guide you through your career development. Where are you at and what are the things you need to do along the way? with the goal in mind, and it's not everyone's goal, but for many students, the goal in mind that there's a job that you're going to start shortly after the program completes. On that note, I wanted to just give a little bit of an overview of what that course itself looks like. The course is called BA 520 and it's career development. We modify sort of the content a little bit every year, but this is generally the types of things that we will cover in that course. And you'll see that this aligns really closely with that career development model that I talked about. A big part of this, I would say, if I wanted to sum it up, is really helping you to think about who you are and what's important to you, helping you identify what you want to do after the program, and helping you get there through things like networking, cover letters, and interview skills. And so all of this sort of comes through the duration of your program. Another thing I wanted to share with you is, as I mentioned, I'm one member of what we call our graduate careers team. We have a number of different teams within the Business Career Centre, but the graduate careers team directly supports the MM program through our career services. So all of these folks on the screen are here to support you during your journey while you're at Sauder. The big things that I think our team really offers to you is that one-on-one coaching, the career development classes, as well as those events that I talked about. Those are all specific to you as a B+MM or MM student while you're in the program. I also wanted to talk a little bit about our business development team. So within the BCC, we have this team here called the Business Development Team. They cover, they have a variety of quite a varied types of experience. They cover many different industries as well as different job functions. So these can be things like consulting, product management, analytics, sales and marketing, procurement, recruitment. They work with employers day in and day out. Their role in the BCC, and also to you as students, is really to provide students with access to the business community. So they support all students at Sauder, which is around 5,000 students. They work with about 6,000 companies, and these can be things from large multinational companies to smaller startups, both in Canada as well as internationally. A large part of their market, which we'll talk about in the employment outcomes, is working with local employers in the Lower Mainland or in the Vancouver area. And they also help to recruit for both internships. So if you're a prospective B+MM student, maybe during your undergrad journey, and as well as full-time roles after your program ends. One thing I mentioned, which does touch on career as well, is something called the Community Business Project, or CBP. This is something that happens in both versions of the program, as Nicole talked about. This is a 4-credit project that you'll do while you're in the graduate portion of your program. It's about 3 months in length, and you'll be assigned into small groups where you really get to gain practical experience applying some of the business skills that you've picked up along the way through your various courses. It also is an opportunity if you work specifically with nonprofit and social enterprises here in Vancouver. Some of the types of projects that have been done in the past are developing a strategic plan, sales plans, a marketing plan, fundraising plans. So really providing some, what we often would call like pro bono or free consulting for nonprofits who might not be able to do this work on their own. The types of organizations that participate are charities, not-for-profits, social enterprises. And on the screen, every year this kind of changes, but these are some of the companies that have been worked with recently. But every year there's new companies that come into play. A lot of students specifically talk about CBP as being really important as a way to solidify or aggregate some of the learning that they've done throughout the MM program. And a lot of students talk about this in interviews when they're looking for those full-time recruitment roles later on. All right. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the employment outcomes from our class of 2023. Before I get there, I want to talk a little bit about who those classes were, just so you get a sense of who was in who was in those programs. The other thing I just want to mention is that I'm going to talk about the class of 2023 in particular, because this is a class where we have a full set of employment data. So we spend a lot of time supporting you through the program, as well as we do a lot of work after the program to make sure that we understand what you're doing after the program. And so this set of data is a complete set of data. So we're still collecting last year's class, the classes of 2024. And so this is the one that I'll talk about today. So you'll see that there's two different profiles listed on the screen. I'll let you kind of take a look at it, but some of the sort of highlights that I would mention is you'll see that the MM class, so the 9-month program that happens from September to May, slightly more international in 2023. And we do see this kind of year over year, more international students in that group. Where the B+MM, we see a little bit more domestic students. So we see those stats almost opposite. Again, we see this kind of year over year. I think a portion of that is students coming to UBC and joining B+MM. So we see more domestic students in that place. You'll see the numbers are slightly different. We do, in recent years, we've seen the B+MM class to be a little bit larger than the MM class. And other things, fairly international, similar average ages, but just to give you a bit of a sense of who the statistics that I talk about later are going to be about. Another thing from the about the classes is to give you a bit of a sense of of what these students have studied in their undergrad degree before entering MM or while complementing that education with the MM program. So just to give you a bit of an idea of where those students come from, they come from many different academic backgrounds. And then I'll talk a little bit about the employment outcomes of this class. So the stats I'm going to show are from 3 months post-graduation. So graduation for each of these versions of the program happen in different times of the year, but it's 3 months after that graduation ceremony that the stats I'm going to show you are from. So these are, and I guess to clarify too, what we've done here is we've combined them into one set of data at this point. So I presented 2 separate profiles, but this information we see here is going to be a combined data set for both of the versions of the program. So a couple of highlights I think that I wanted to mention. 76% of the class was hired within 3 months of graduation. I think that's a really good stat. This is of students that are seeking employment, so I think that's good. We've presented here both the average as well as the median salaries. We tend to present these together just in case there's sort of really high or really low numbers in those salaries. You can kind of skew that average. So the median salary can be a really good place to talk about. If you're curious, the salary range itself for this class started in sort of the low 40s all the way up to a high number at $180,000. So there can be quite a variety of salary, but I think these numbers on the screen, the average and the median, should give a good indication of where most students land from a salary point of view after the program. Another thing I wanted to highlight here is that about 80% of our students stay here in British Columbia. In particular, they also stay sort of here in the Lower Mainland or in Vancouver. But you'll see that a number of students also go to Ontario or went to Ontario in this class, as well as found employment outside of Canada. Sometimes when students go outside of Canada, they might be returning to their home country. They might be going to a new country, but just want to present that as well. And then another piece on here I wanted to just talk about is sort of where students found that employment. So we have two two categories here, graduate facilitated as well as school facilitated. So this is collected at a survey kind of after the program. And so graduate facilitated is where the student themselves, really feels like they found a job on their own. I think, this is a good number in the sense that, I think it means that we're, as a career center, really empowering students or empowered this class to go find those job opportunities on their own. But you also see, a pretty good chunk of students felt that the school, the Sauder School of Business, really helped facilitate their employment post-program. This could be through the Career Center. It could also be sometimes through faculty or other events or connections that they made while they were a student here at Sauder. One slide, or one thing that a lot of folks are often interested in particular, is what are some of the industries that students are going into after the program. You'll see here the percentages kind of break down pretty far, but some of the highlights I think are really key is this idea that a lot of students are going into healthcare, pharmacy, and biotech. In particular, I would say it's within the healthcare industry. A lot of students in healthcare, in the healthcare industry, are working in roles such as projects that are related to project management and/or data analysis. Those are kind of two really key areas. In BC, there's a lot of healthcare roles. And in Vancouver, there's a lot of centralization of a lot of those services. So a lot of employment within healthcare is in Vancouver. Technology, there's been some ups and downs in the tech industry in recent years. However, Vancouver has a really healthy tech environment. Again, this can be quite a variety of roles. It can be very technical roles, really drawing on some computer science type skills, but it can also be other roles within this function. We've seen a lot of students go into the tech industry to work in human resources or marketing or project management or product management, lots of different things. And then lastly, we see kind of finance or financial services. So Vancouver is not necessarily the hub for a lot of the finance roles. Toronto, if you want to stay within Canada, Toronto has a lot of kind of what we call like big finance or high finance. So they have the big banks are all centralized in Toronto. But in Vancouver, there is also a lot of opportunity in this area. Related to technology, there's a pretty healthy fintech or financial technology environment in Vancouver, as well as there are definitely banks that have representation here. And because Vancouver has, really good real estate as well, there is also a lot of kind of money or financial things happening in the Lower Mainland. Couple other highlights I'll just mention in here. Industries, real estate. There's a lot of commercial real estate in Vancouver, as well as obviously personal real estate. Media and entertainment, in particular, a lot of students maybe who have studied more of a fine arts or marketing background. Media and entertainment is a big industry as well. Vancouver is Hollywood North. So there's a lot of film and television in particular that happens in Vancouver or in the Lower Mainland. And some of these other ones on the bottom, so consumer products, again, tends to be a little more Toronto-based, but it is a place where the MM and B+MM grads have gone. And consulting is another one that's really important, where you can combine a lot of skills. A lot of MM and B+MM students develop a skill set through their undergrad and with the MM that is well suited to the consulting industry. I'm not going to talk through the rest, but just wanted to give you kind of an overview. I think one of the lasting thoughts I'd give on this in particular is just that there is a lot of different ways or things you can do with the MM. It doesn't suit you to one specific industry or area. Another thing I wanted to mention is just a little bit about some of the functions. So we talk about industries a lot, but function, sort of the what you do in your job, is another way to think about this. This graph doesn't necessarily tell a lot. There's a couple categories here that are a little bit vague. But what we see if we think of general management, This is where we see people doing roles like project coordinator or business analyst, as well as marketing and sales. Those are important industries. And you'll see again this 12% in other. Again, a variety of kind of places this can go, but there is a lot of sort of roles in here. So again, what I would highlight on this slide is just that there's a number of different functions you can go into. And it's not always super clear when we think of industries or functions and what that means in the outcome. Another thing I wanted to highlight is just some of what we call our key hiring partners. So key hiring partners are employers that within this class highlighted 2 or more students from the class of 2023. So these are some of those big ones. Couple things I'll mention here. Provincial Health Services Authority, or PHSA, is one of the largest healthcare authorities in British Columbia. There's a number of others, but this one has hired a lot of Sauder graduates, including specifically MM graduates over the years. Aritzia, really big retail with operations here in Vancouver. Deloitte is a consulting firm or tends to hire a lot of students in their consulting arm. Fintel Connect, kind of a tech role, SAP, tech, TD, financial services, the province of British Columbia or the BC Public Service. Number of students have gone in that. In particular, sometimes students from kind of a social sciences or humanities background. The city of Vancouver, there's a lot of interest again, kind of in the municipal or government type roles. BC Assessment is a Crown Corporation, and lastly, Brex is a financial or a fintech organization. So again, highlighting just that there's a lot of different hiring opportunities, I suppose, is what I would say. Next, I'm going to talk through just a couple of different ways students have navigated the program or alumni have navigated the program and where they've headed to after the program. This one here is an MM alumni profile. So the student or the alumni I'm sort of talking about here completed what's called a Bachelor of Technology degree from outside of UBC or outside of Canada. They came to UBC or to Sauder to do the MM program. They had a little bit of work experience in their home country, so about 1.5 years before joining the MM. And they were able to apply some of the skills and experiences from their Bachelor of Technology or undergrad degree, as well as some of those skills they learned in the MM program to get a role as a business analyst with the Provincial Health Services Authority or PHSA. And so so there, this is kind of one example of how they navigated that. They sort of worked with some of their stuff from previous, and they ended up in PHSA. The other one I wanted to highlight here is a B+MM alumni profile in particular. So this alumni studied a program here at UBC called, which is a Bachelor of Science in Food Science, which is one of the faculties that's eligible for the B+MM program. So in that program, they learned a lot of, very specific information around food science. In the Master of Management program, they learned a lot of kind of key business skills or developed their business acumen, we might say. And combining these two things together, they ended up taking on an R&D role at what's called Silver Hills. So if you're local, you might know a bread company called Silver Hills Bakery. They're a large bread company that distributes in a lot of grocery stores. And so taking those two sort of educational experiences together, as well as some internships they did along the way, they landed this very cool role here in Vancouver. Lastly, I just wanted to, so I hope that kind of gave you a bit of a snapshot about sort of some ways. There's, it's obviously these pictures can be much more complex, but just wanted to give you a bit of an idea of where some folks have gone. Lastly, I wanted to talk a little bit about some labor market highlights. Now, depending on where you're at in terms of whether you're just looking at starting your undergrad degree, so kind of that 4.5-year pathway, or whether you're much closer to entering, say, the MM program, so the 9-month program or a year kind of idea. These labor market highlights can sort of shift and change, but we wanted to give you a bit of a sense of where we think things are and where we think things are kind of headed. So especially students who maybe if you're an international student, I know there's a lot of domestic students on the call, but it can be a big choice to come to Canada and study. So we wanted to include some information. So in particular, this comes from a publication by the BC government called the Labour Market Outlook. So this is the 2023 version. So they haven't updated it since then. But just to give you a bit of a sense of who's there. So knowing, part of presenting this as well is just knowing that about 80% of our graduates stay here in BC. So this is probably the most relevant information for our students. So over the next decade, it is projected that there will be almost 1 million job openings in British Columbia. The majority of these roles will be focused in the Greater Vancouver area, and young people, so kind of age 29 or younger, I think that's probably most of you on the call, will be entering the labor force for the first time, are expected to make up 47% of new job seekers. You see in the dark blue in this graph here, there's going to be some real big changes happening in the BC labor market. In particular, this 65%, this dark blue piece. Those are people that are going to be leaving the workplace, so retiring, and that means those roles are going to become open. So we will need graduates and young people to fill those roles. This light blue, the 35%, is what we call an expansion. So these are going to be as the labor market or as the industries continue to grow and develop, there's going to be new roles created. So it just, the main thing here is just to know that there is a lot of people that are going to retire. So those will be replaced, as well as the market's going to continue to develop and grow. The other thing I wanted to highlight is just some industries that are forecasted to grow or where these roles might be. So 5 industries will generate about half of all jobs over the next 10 years in British Columbia. Healthcare and social assistance, professional, scientific and technical services, retail trade, construction, as well as educational services. Just as a kind of FYI, when we think of professional, scientific and technical services, this includes businesses like architecture, engineering, IT, technical, consulting, design, research, as well as advertising services. Again, mainly just wanting to highlight that I think this reflects pretty closely, or maps really closely to what some of those employment outcomes were, where students have landed versus where roles are, where those job openings are going to come from in the next 10 years. Lastly, I wanted to just talk a little bit about the Canadian employment market. When students come into our programs, they often talk about wanting to work at these really massive companies, Google, Facebook, really large banks. All of these are definitely out there, and they're definitely opportunities that our students take advantage of. But one of the things I think we do a lot of work on educating students about is what we call SMEs, what are also called small and medium-sized enterprises. So a small business is a business that's 1 to 99 employees. A medium-sized business is 100 to 599 employees, and a large business is more than 600 or 500, sorry. And in Canada, the private sector employs more than 12 million people. You'll see here that the small and medium-sized businesses employ more than 60% of these people. The reason I want to kind of point this out is just to have a kind of broader view of different employment opportunities. There's a lot of very satisfying employment that can happen from small and medium-sized businesses. On that note, I think I am good for time, and I'm going to turn it back to Nicole. I'm not sure, my next slide just says thank you. So I'm not sure, Nicole, if you want me to advance to further slides, but I do want
your slides.
to
Oh yeah. Yeah, please go ahead, Logan. Thank you so much for the presentation. I just have a few reminders for folks before we get to a bit of time for Q&A. So I'll just go over that. But I just want to thank you so much for sharing those insights. So much good information, so many good things for our kind of callers to think about as they consider our programs, but also apply for them. And to think about what's the potential to get support from the Business Career Centre in the future if they do our program. So yeah, really, really wonderful. Thank you so much. I guess it's a thank you from me to you is what this slide is meant to say, Logan. If you want to move to the next one, I'll just go through a few things. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we have a couple of really important deadlines coming up. So as many of you might be aware, we have our second round deadline if you're applying to the MM kind of program coming up on January 10th. It's a really important deadline for Canadian students and permanent residents because it's the deadline where you would be considered automatically for our early entrance scholarship. And then for international students, this is also an important deadline if you're planning to apply for a GMAT or GRE waiver. It's actually the date you need to submit a full application with references completed, as well as all the other pieces of your supporting documents in order to be considered for a GMAT or GRE waiver. So please note that. And then we have a few other deadlines, obviously, beyond that as well, if you're looking forward. And then for the next slide, we'll show you here. This is the B+MM deadlines. So if you're applying from high school, you might have already applied. I know a few people on the call had already submitted an application, and you might have done that in our first round by December 1st. But the next round deadline for first year entry, so folks coming from high school, is January 31st. So just noting that is coming up. And then if you're already in your undergrad program at UBC and you're thinking about applying to start the B+MM and kind of enter in your second or third year, our first round deadline is coming up on January 31st for you as well. So we've got a couple of folks on the call from our staff. We have Logan here able to answer your questions too. And so I think the next slide might be the Q&A one if you move forward. Here's how you can connect with us. Feel free to take a photo, screenshot if you want to kind of book more time to chat one-on-one or in a small group setting, as well as our upcoming events. But our next slide, there we go, is probably our Q&A. So yeah, we open it up to you. You're welcome to put any questions you have in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute yourself, well, raise your hand and we can call on you to unmute yourself. We're eager to hear from you. So please let us know if there's anything you're wondering about, whether it comes to careers or even about our programs and the application process. But definitely let's take advantage. If you have a careers-based question, we have Logan here with us. And while folks are kind of generating their questions, if they have any, or if they want to put them in the chat, I just wanted to mention, Logan, I think the point you make about the kind of small and medium businesses is so important, just to kind of think about that kind of flexibility you talked about in the career model of kind of being open to different possibilities and exploring. And so I think that really underlines that kind of point that the Business Career Centre focuses on, where you're kind of looking at many different opportunities and kind of seeing what's out there as well. Perfect. We have a question here from Amalia. Wondering when application results are released and an interview component for B+MM. Perfect. So I can speak to that, and Scott, feel free to jump in as it's a bit BMM focused. So in terms of the second part, for B+MM applicants, there's no live interview process. You will be submitting a video response that you'll be prompted to do, and so that kind of stands in for that purpose. Compared to the Masters of Management program application, if you're doing the MM application, you would submit a video, but then you would also, if you make it to the next round, be invited to do, and we'd ask you to do an interview with a person virtually in a real-time setting. So that's a little bit different in terms of the process. Scott, in terms of the application results for B+MM, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So it'll depend if you're applying directly out of high school as a year one student, or if you're applying for year 2 or 3 to join the program. For year 1, UBC has started pushing out offers for the undergraduate programs early. So there are offers going out now, and that will continue until April. So if you haven't gotten an offer of admission to your undergraduate program yet, don't worry. They're still going to be coming out, and they will continue to do so for the next few months. The BMM additional offer on top of that will kind of follow again over the next few weeks and months. So I don't think immediately, but soon enough they will start coming out. And then if you're a transfer student, then it's more so May that those offers start coming out.
And I see there was a question. We'll just maybe jump ahead to, is it Yana? Yana's question around UBCO and getting into the B+MM program. I'm not sure how that would work with maybe a transfer student or yeah, maybe if you could speak to that, Scott, and then we'll jump into some
Yeah,
of the
so
others.
UBCO has a B+MM program, but it is entirely separate from our UBC Sauder Bachelor+Master of Management program. The UBCO Faculty of Management is its entire own thing that runs its own program and has its entirely own processes. So if you are intending to go to UBCO for the full length of your degree, then I would refer you to UBCO's website and then their resources because it's not affiliated with our program. If you're starting at UBCO and hoping to transfer to UBC Vancouver for like second or third year, then you would be able to join the Sauder Bachelor+Master of Management program once you apply to transfer to UBC. It's the same process as if you were an internal UBC student at that point.
So everyone knows Scott offers drop-in advising as well as booked appointments, which you can kind of see. Maybe if you want to throw that into the chat, Scott, that might be helpful. I know folks tend to have a number of questions around kind of how the B+MM works. And I'll also put in a moment in my drop-in advising, my booked advising for MM students or MM applicants. So I see there's another question here from Tyler. I'll answer that and then we'll go over to you, Logan, for the one that's around careers. So Tyler's wondering around the January 10th deadline for the GMAT score to be kind of completed and submitted. So yeah, if you're looking to submit for that January 10th deadline to be eligible to be considered either, well, for some of our scholarships, and we do need to see that completed application with your supporting documents, and your GMAT score is included in that if you plan to write. Unless you're asking for a waiver. And so that's an important part. But please know too, like if you can't meet the January 10th deadline, I would still encourage you to submit your application and your results as soon as you can. We review applications for the MM program on a rolling basis. And so I always advise people the earlier the better, as long as you kind of take your time with your application and do it completely and thoroughly. Because the sooner you submit with your full supporting documents, the sooner you'll be able to get a response, as well as potentially the more kind of competitive you can be in terms of getting a spot in the program, because we do fill up on a rolling basis, as well as scholarships are given on a rolling basis as well. So it's kind of advantageous to you. So if you don't happen to meet the January 10th deadline, don't worry. You can still apply. But yeah, I would suggest doing it shortly thereafter if you're almost ready to go. Perfect. So over to Valley's question here. So maybe Logan, if you want to take this one. Sure. Any students joining the MM program already in an industry role and using it to advance? Yeah, maybe if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I think we see this in a couple different ways, and I'm not sure, Valley, exactly where you are in your kind of journey. But the two kind of ways we see this is students who have maybe done internships throughout their undergrad that are maybe similar to what they want to do after the program. We also see this as well, especially the MM program. You can have kind of that 0 to 2 years of work experience before joining the MM. So we do see students coming into that program in particular with sort of full-time experience within that 0 to 2 range. And so, you know, kind of in answering your question about whether they sort of advance or progress in the same role or industry, or whether they transition to new roles and industries, to be honest, it kind of varies. I think some students really are enjoying that kind of vein of work they've already done, and they want to continue in that place, and they see the MM as a place to continue to build some skills that they can apply in the workplace. We also do see this kind of thing where people come into the program really thinking they know what they want to do, often through previous experiences, and then throughout the program decide they want to do kind of a bit of a 180. They want to try something, they want to go into something totally different after the program. This kind of idea, kind of what you've highlighted here, is sort of kind of like a pivot or a kind of career progression. We see this, to be honest, a little bit more often with our more experienced students, where it's definitely more top of mind, whether they want to kind of stay in the same area or whether they want to pivot to a totally new industry. But I think within the MM program, it's a little bit of a mixed bag of kind of enjoying what you've done previously, continuing that way, or maybe trying something new after the program. So hope that helps.
Yeah, Logan, and I just echo that to also say, like, I guess the diversity of the kind of courses that the students take in the BMM and the MM, in terms of, yeah, the different areas. I think just, yeah, reiterating that, that you learn so much about different functional areas of business, different kind of opportunities to kind of explore from marketing to accounting to finance to kind of organizational behavior, things like that. And so it really sets you up if you do want to pivot to have some good kind of exposure to different areas. So yeah, I think a really good opportunity if that's of interest to pivot. Perfect. So I know there's a number of questions coming in about the BMM and the application process. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott to kind of address some of those. I think we're at around MIA is the last one we kind of pick up on.
Yeah, so could you explain the difference between first and second round for BMM for second and third year students? So yeah, sure. So there's the two deadlines for students that are transferring into the BMM. One is January 31st, which is the early deadline. The final deadline is May 6th. Fundamentally, if you are interested in this program and you know that you want to apply for it and you're ready to apply by that January 31st deadline, I would encourage you to do so. What that basically will do is it just kind of increases the odds that you'll hear back sooner. Our transfer offers still don't go out until May because we need to see your final grades from that winter session. But it will enable us to get through your application sooner and offer you admission to the program sooner. But if you're not sure you need more time, then the May 6th deadline is still perfectly viable time to submit that application. It isn't going to disadvantage you necessarily in your application. So that's really the only real difference there is it might just increase or move up the time in which you might hear back from your offer. I'll just keep going here because Amalia asks about the BMM admission comes separate from the undergrad result, which it does, yes. So when you apply to the BMM program, you're applying to UBC's undergraduate program and the BMM separately. They are evaluated separately, and so the offers might come at different times too. The undergrad offer will always come first if it's going to come first because you need to be admitted to an undergraduate program at UBC to get the BMM offer. Sometimes they'll come at the same time. Other times the BMM offer will follow up sometime after that. So if you have received your offer of admission from your undergraduate program and are still waiting on BMM, that's perfectly normal. It doesn't indicate anything either way about if you'll be successful or not for BMM. It just means that our offers come a little bit later than the undergraduate offer does. And BMM, again, as Nicole said, there is no live interview component for the BMM. It is simply the video submission. I will also note that if you apply to the Bachelor of Commerce program and are getting it a bit confused with the BCom video interview, it's an entirely separate kind of video submission that you're doing for the B+MM. So no interview, you're simply submitting that 90-second video and really taking the time to really think about how you can best present yourself in that application. Stephanie then asks, out of high school, how do you express interest in the BMM? So when you're going through Education Planner BC and you're filling out your application to UBC, if you select an eligible program, either as choice 1 or choice 2, there will be a box that opens up that asks you, would you like to add the Bachelor+Master's Management program to your application? You would tick that box, and then it would prompt you to also then go to our website, create an account, and start your B+MM application. And again, those two separate applications you would complete and then submit before their respective deadlines. And then there was also a question about the International Scholars Program, which is a scholarship program for international students that is by application only, and the deadline is well past. So, but if you've already applied for that, to my knowledge, you can do BMM with that program, and encourage you if you're interested to do so. The funding is a question I'm not sure about. To my knowledge, it wouldn't cover the MM portion of your degree. International Scholars Program the funding is designed to cover your undergraduate fees, and I believe the maximum is 4 or 5 years of study. But if you have questions specifically about if the funding would cover BMM, then I would direct you to your contacts from the International Scholars Program. Whether or not you can do the BMM, absolutely. There's no restrictions there on whether you can do the program, but I don't believe the scholarship would cover the BMM fees.
Yeah, we just had a call back around from Yana about checking the box indicating.
So if you didn't check the box, you should reach out to UBC Undergraduate Admissions, and I'll put the contact form in the chat here, and you should let them know that you would like to add the B+MM to your application, and then you should go to, again, was Yana the one asking about the UBCO degree? Yeah, Yana, in that case, then you would follow the UBCO directions on how to actually submit that application. But the first step will be contacting undergraduate admissions as soon as possible, and then asking them to add that application.
We're just getting close to time here. I think maybe a couple of us have to log off as well. So I'm just going to put in the email address if you want to contact for any BMM focused questions beyond what Scott's explained around specific instances where you need to get in contact around certain things. So we have the BMM one, and then we also have the MM email address that you can contact us with any recruitment and admissions questions. And then you'll see on the screen as well, thank you, Logan, on the left side with the QR code, that's where you can find opportunities to book a meeting with either Scott or myself if you navigate to the correct program. Yeah, we'd be really happy to kind of continue to engage as you work through this application process. We know it can be a bit confusing, and so we're here to support you. But I do want to wrap up and just say thank you to Scott for being on the call. Thank you to Logan so much for presenting and walking us through all that great content. An important thing to highlight, maybe we'll send this in the follow-up email, is there's a great employment report that Logan was using a lot of the stats from. And so we can share that with all of you as well, so you can reference it and kind of see in a little bit more detail some other information that's provided, which I think is really useful. But yeah, we wish you all the best. Happy New Year to everyone. I know we're just getting started into 2025, and we're really excited to welcome you hopefully on this journey with us as you consider doing a master's degree with us at UBC Sauder. So thank you again. Thanks for your questions, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.